Good morning, folks. John Adams, the Rehab and Documentation Guru. Hope you're doing well. Getting ready to take my daughter on a weekend where she gets to be part of a college, just experience classes, what campus life is like before she heads there in the fall. Anyway, hope you're doing well. On a geriatric Facebook group for therapists, which has about 42,000 audience, somebody posed a question about billing NUStep and things like OmniCycle and reciprocal trainers and whatnot as a therapist. What do you put that under? And I saw lots of responses. Some of them were pretty good, and some of them were downright not good. So how do you handle the billing for the time a person is sitting on a NUStep? Well, first of all, in a lot of applications, NUStep, OmniCycle, etc., would not really be skilled. Let's just get that out of the way. But assuming that you're working on the things like range of motion, strength, and endurance, then the code would be 97110. If your focus is on things that fall within the definition of a CPT code, that's what you bill. Some question whether they could bill like a therapeutic activity. Well, therapeutic activity is generally going to be billed for functional activities. And sitting on a bicycle is not generally functional. Now, it might be a preparatory activity for a functional activity. Let's say like gait. So some therapists have used it for gait training. If a patient has problems with reciprocal patterning of their limbs, then putting them on something like a NUStep, which is not bad for this. You think about it, because you move your arms opposite your legs, just like when you walk. Maybe as a pre-gait activity, it's not a bad option. The other thing I saw routinely on this thread on Facebook was people mentioning strengthening. Well, if you're going to strengthen somebody, in general, training for long periods of time at low, let's face it, folks, most of our patients are doing low intensity, maybe moderate intensity periodically, is not the way to strengthen. Studies routinely show that moderate to significant amounts of force need to be generated for a relatively short duration. Generally, that time under tension, where you're working a muscle at a submaximal but fairly heavy load resistance, has to occur between 60 to 90 seconds for the duration, total duration. So you look at, for instance, doing maybe a couple sets of an activity, exercise like bench press or leg press or something like that. But sitting on a NUStep for 15 minutes, the primary focus is not going to be strengthening. Now, one person asked me, what about functional endurance? If you've been with my channel for a while, you know how I feel about the terms functional endurance. And this is because functional endurance in and of itself is not a skilled term. So what do I mean by that? So if you're working on somebody increasing their, here's another one, activity tolerance for something. Let's say upper body dressing. They poop out before they get all their upper body dressing done. What is the cause of the poop out? If I could use that term. What's causing them not to be able to continue the activity? Is it cardiovascular? Is it pulmonary? Is it pain? Is it muscular endurance as opposed to cardio or pulmonary? Although I would say oftentimes patients suffer from them hand in hand, where they have problems with both at the same time. So what is the root cause that's creating the activity tolerance or functional endurance to be low? And so maybe that falls within the category of putting them on the NUStep or OmniCycle or a reciprocal trainer of some sort. In which case we work on parameters to get them to that point where they can have the activity tolerance. So with that said, most people use NUStep as a, let's throw the patient on this for 15 minutes so I can have time for documentation, point of service documentation, which inherently doesn't make it skilled. I've been in tons of gyms, guys. I visited lots of rehab centers back when I had a role where I would do clinical auditing, education, etc. on visits. And I routinely saw patient on NUStep. Let's face it, NUStep's probably the most popular. And I'll see the therapist that's with them back turned to the patient documenting. And that's not skilled. A skill that you bill for, let's say TheraX, because we're on that subject, requires you to be in attendance. And in attendance means you are actively engaged with the patient. You can't possibly do that when you're documenting and you don't have eyes and cognitive awareness of what's going on with the patient. Also, if you're working with somebody that the goal is to increase, let's say, cardiopulmonary endurance, you would be monitoring closely, if it takes the skill of a therapist to work with the patient, whether or not they're within parameters that would suggest that they're getting that done. So for instance, using the 65 to 80 or 65 to 85 or 60 to 85 range. I mean, you see different literature support different ranges, but they're all in the same ballpark. Let's just say 60 to 80% of their predicted max heart rate. And I've talked in the past about the Carvonin formula, or Cavornin. I always mispronounce it. Anyway, I've got a video on it. You want to follow these parameters carefully to say that you're truly getting a training effect. For a person who is healthy, who goes on, let's say, a run where they're training for a race, or somebody that's going on a bike ride and training for a race, or like I used to do bike-a-thons because I was slow. I had good endurance, but I was slow. For those individuals, they're looking for training ranges. And so we should be monitoring our patients carefully during that time to make sure they're within that training range. Now, you could possibly, be right with them, periodically documenting, observing them, using palpation to check pulse or a pulse oximeter or whatever you're doing to just verify that they're within the proper training zone. And maybe they've got other things going on that require the skill set of a therapist to safely and effectively monitor them. Then all of that time could therefore be billable. But for the most part, a lot of patients are thrown on NUStep as just a holdover so the therapist can do their documentation. So again, bill it according to what you're primarily working on. And most of the time that's going to be TheraX. What about neuromuscular reeducation? Like if you have a stroke patient? Well, that is a possibility. So what does neuromuscular reed work on? It works on balance, proprioception, kinesthesia, posture. I forgot something. Balance, proprioception, kinesthesia, posture, and coordination. So it is possible that you could do those things with the patient on a NUStep and bill it as therapeutic activity, or neuromuscular reeducation. Don't mind me. More coffee. But in general, those are going to be the billing codes that you'll look at. So anyway, I hope that was helpful. I did a video on this like 5 years ago. I looked it up the other day because I posted it to this group as a suggestion as to what makes proper billing for TheraX, neuromuscular reed, or I should say NUStep in general. Anyway, wish me luck going off to college for a weekend with my daughter and my wife. And I'm sure she'll like it. It's a well-known college campus. And anyway, you take care. Hope you're doing well. Don't forget to like and subscribe. God bless.